speak about Dalits, we are not just talking about a community, we are speaking about a civilization long experience. An experience where people were pushed down for centuries, yet they continue to rise. They continue to rise. They carried history on their shoulders, pain in their memories, and courage in their brain. Their story did not begin in modern India. Their story began in the deep layers of the past, inside the complex and often cruel systems called caste. Caste did not appear in one day. It was not born from a single event. It slowly grew out of old social groups, tribes, occupations, rituals, and beliefs. Over time, India created a structure where people were not seen for who they were, but for what they were told to be. And once that structure hardened, it became like a wall high, thick, and unbreakable wall. Dalits stood outside that wall for centuries. Inside this system, there were two important ideas. The first one is Varna, second one is Jati. Varna was the old theoretical division like four big boxes of society. But Jati was the real world. Thousands of small groups, each with its own rules, each with its own boundaries, and each with own restrictions. If Varna was the idea, Jati was the lived reality. And it was in this reality that Dalits were pushed to the bottom, treated as if they did not belong, as if they touch their presence, their very shadow carried danger. But the question we must ask ourselves is simple. How did this rigid system survive so long? The answer lies in the way it evolved. Many thinkers tried to explain the origin of caste. Some said it came from race. Some said it came from occupation. Some connected it to religion. Others linked it to political control or ancient rituals. Each theory, it tried to offer a piece of the puzzle, but the whole picture, it remained complex. A clearer understanding comes when we see caste as a closed class, a group that allowed no entry and no exit. They were locked out, others were locked in, the doors were shut tightly, and the key was held by those who benefited from the system. Over generations, this idea of purity, superiority, and separation, it becomes a habit. So normal that people forgot it was man-made. And when a man-made idea becomes normal, it becomes dangerous. Yet, caste in India was not the only system of social division in the world. There are many societies that have slavery, feudalism, segregation, racial hierarchies, and class divisions. But what made this caste unique was its deep emotional and spiritual justification. It was tied to birth, it was tied to ritual, it was tied to destiny. It was not just social, it was also psychological. It was not just a rule, it was also a worldview. And in that worldview, Dalits were seen as less than human. But here is the truth we must understand. No system is eternal. No injustice is permanent. And no human being is bound to stay at the bottom forever. The truth is visible in the long journey of resistance that began centuries ago. Even in ancient India, there were voices that refused to bow down. The earliest challenges came from the teachings of Buddha. Teachings of Buddha. They offered a revolutionary ideas that every human being is equal in their ability to seek truth. They rejected birth-based inequality. They challenged ritual superiority. They created spaces. Where Dalits could stand as learners, thinkers, even as human beings. Then came the Bhakti movement. The voices of saints. Who use poverty instead of swords, compassion instead of hierarchy. They sang that the soul has no caste. They sang that devotion is not restricted to any birth. They created a way through Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, and even North India, touching the hearts of those who were pushed to the margins. These saints became shining lamp in the dark age, showing that spirituality can be a force of social justice. Then, during medieval times and later under colonial rule, new winds entered India. Reformers, thinkers, philosophers, they began questioning the world order. They fought against child marriage. They fought against rigid rituals. They fought against caste discrimination. Some built schools for these denied learning. Some challenged caste in religious spaces. Some created new organizations to uplift those excluded from social life. Then came Christian missionaries. They unknowingly opened doors to education for many Dalits. Schools became places where they could finally see, read, and write. They can imagine a life beyond humiliation through education. Colonial laws, they introduced ideas of equality before the state. And slowly, the world order began to crack. Through all these centuries, one message keep rising over and over again. They were human. These Dalits were human. Dalits were equal. They deserve dignity. Each moment, whether spiritual, social, or political, they added one more stroke of courage to their struggle. Each voice of resistance, it became a stone that slowly weakened the old walls of caste. Each reform, it opened a tiny window towards freedom. Before the world heard the thunder of Baba Sahib's voice, before the constitution carried the promise of equality, there were sparks, small sparks in different corners of India. These sparks, they came from people who refused to accept the fate society tried to write for. They came from Dalits. They came from those who stood with them. Together, these sparks, they formed the early movements that slowly began softening the hardest stone of Indian caste society. So, let's see the early seeds of resistance before Baba Sahib Ambedkar. If you see in Maharashtra, Jyotiba Phule, he planted one of the first seeds of awakening. He did not simply talk about equality, he built it through the Satyashodhak Samaj. He opened schools for those who were denied even the right to learn. He challenged the scriptures and customs that declared Dalits inferior. He lifted their heads and told them, you are human, you are worthy, you can stand up. And for the first time, many among them felt seen. In Kerala, Narayana Guru, he used the power of simple truth. His message echoed across villages. One caste, one religion, one God for human beings. He broke the walls of ritual purity and said that spirituality, it belongs to everyone. For Dalits who were banned from temples, his words were not just philosophy, they were liberation. Then came Iyengar, a name carried with fire. He walked into the streets of Travancore, demanding the right for Dalit children to attend schools. When upper caste resisted, he marched again. When they burned schools, he rebuilt hope. He led strikes. He organized movements. And he told Dalit that silence was no longer an option. Then in Tamil Nadu area, he rose like a storm through his self-respect movement. Through his self-respect movement, Periyar shook the foundation of caste pride. He said loudly, what many fear to whisper. He fought superstitions. He fought patriarchy. He fought Brahminical domination. He built a culture where dignity was not charity. Dignity was a human right. Dignity was a human right. Across other regions, many Dalit groups also emerged. Adi Dravida, Adi Dharma, and several local caste organizations. They emerged to fight. They tried to protect their communities. They opened schools. They fight for temple entry, and they demanded a life of respect. Their names may not be known to everyone today, but their courage, it laid the foundation for a revolution yet to come. But these movements, they had limits. They challenged social treatment. Yes. They questioned rituals. Yes. They fought locally. Yes. But they did not yet have a unified national direction. They did not yet connect social rights with the political power. They opened doors. But the locked fortress of caste still stood tall. The stage was set. But the main voice, the powerful voice had not yet arrived. So let's see that powerful voice. Baba Sahib. The rise of Baba Sahib, a turning point in history. When Ambedkar entered the scene, everything changed. He brought not just emotion, but Ambedkar, Baba Sahib, he brought intellect, not just protest, but vision, not just anger, but a roadmap. He saw something the earlier movements had missed. That social liberation without political power is incomplete. The Dalits needed not just sympathy, they needed authority. They needed rights. They were written in law. They needed a nation that recognized their humanity. This is why Baba Sahib Ambedkar's movement, it became a turning point. He led from the front. When they marched to Mahar to drink water from a public tank, which was a basic human right denied to those people of Mahar. The Mahar Satyagraha, it was not merely about water. It was a declaration. We exist. We belong. We will not live on the margins anymore. That's the declaration. Then came the struggle for temple entry. They were told they were too impure to step inside. Baba Sahib rejected this humiliation. He guided them to claim their spiritual dignity. to challenge the idea that birth determines holiness. Then, at the Round Table Conference in London, he did not go as a petitioner. He did not go as a petitioner to London. He went to London as the representative of the millions, who have been silenced for ages. He carried the pain, but also the power. He demanded separate electorates so that they could choose leaders who would truly represent them. He knew how political power meant self-respect. But sadly, then came the Pune Pact, a moment of deep compromise forced upon. Baba Sahib signed the Pune Pact to prevent a national crisis. But he did it with heavy sacrifice. And through this struggle, he taught them an important lesson. Even in defeat, dignity must stand tall. Baba Sahib's greatest gift came later, the drafting of the Indian Constitution. He built the foundation of a new India, writing equality into the heart of the nation. For the first time, the law became a shield for those who had no protection for thousands of years. He made the state responsible for justice, not society alone. But he did not stop there. He understood that mental slavery was even deeper than physical discrimination. And so, he offered a new path, Navayan Buddhism. It was not just a religious change. It was a cultural revolution. He told them, you do not need a birth certificate to claim dignity. You do not need anyone approval to be equal. Break the chains inside you and the world outside. It will begin to change. If you change inside, outside automatically will change. With that historic conversion, Baba Sahib turned the centuries of pain into a doorway of pride and self-worth. After Baba Sahib left this world, the path ahead for Dalits, it did not become easier. In fact, it became more complicated. They stood at a crossroads. They had a constitution that promised equality, but a society that still clung tightly to world hierarchy. They had legal rights, but no guarantees of daily living. And yet, they did not stop walking. They continued pushing, speaking, organizing, and dreaming. In the early years after Baba Sahib passing, they placed their hope in a political dream, a dream called the Republican Party of India, the RPA. It was born to carry forward Baba Sahib's vision to unite them under one political banner. For a moment, it felt like the beginning of a new dawn. But slowly, cracks began to show. Internal fights, ego clashes, power struggles. The movement lost its direction. Instead of becoming a strong bridge for their unity, that RPA becomes a symbol of fragmentation. But history teaches a beautiful lesson. When one path weakens, the another rises. And rise it did. That happened in 1972. Like lightning across the skies of Maharashtra. A group of fiery young Dalit writers, Dalit thinkers, Dalit activists. They came together to form the Dalit Panthers. Their energy was electric. Their language was bold. Their spirit was rebellious. They said, we will not whisper. We will roar. They refused to accept caste, refused to accept silence, refused to accept humiliation. The Dalit Panthers, they brought a new message. You have a voice. Use it loudly. They spoke about human rights. They defeated victims of atrocities. They challenged both caste oppression and they challenged government indifference. They inspired a whole generation of Dalit youth to believe in themselves, not as victims, but as fighters. Their courage shook the system. Alongside this rise in activism came another revolution. Dalit literary movement. The words became weapons, poetry became fire, stories became mirrors that exposed the cruelty of caste society and the strength of those who survived. Through literature, they declared our experience matters. Our pain matters. Our joy matters. Dalit literature did not beg for acceptance. It demanded recognition. Across the country, state-wise movements, they also grew stronger. In Maharashtra, Baba Sahib's spirit remained intense. In Karnataka, the Dalit Sangharsh Samiti, it mobilized thousands with discipline and collective action. In Tamil Nadu, Periyar's nationalist wave, it continued to empower them. In Uttar Pradesh, a new alliance changed the landscape. New political identity. It changed the landscape. In Andhra Pradesh, intellectuals and cultural movements, they shaped new forms of self-respect. Every state had its own rhythm, its own history, its own struggles. But every movement, it carried the same heartbeat, dignity, equality, and self-respect. Yes, even as they rose, they faced a painful truth. Caste division existed inside their own communities. Different Dalit castes sometimes competed against each other. Sub-caste identities, they diluted unity. Political parties played on these divisions. Fragmentation became a challenge almost as dangerous as oppression itself. Still, despite these cracks, they continued their journey. Because when a community has survived 2000 years of exclusion, they know how to rise even when broken. Baba Sahib believed something very simple yet very profound. If a religion brands you as an inferior, you must leave it. If a religion denies you dignity, you must walk out. No human being is born to be unclean. No human being is born to be untouchable. This belief guided his decision to embrace this. He rejected the idea that spiritual truth, it must come wrapped in caste hierarchy. He offered them a new identity, not based on birth, but on choice. Not based on stigma, but on human equality. But why Buddhism? Because it spoke of compassion. Buddhism spoke of compassion. It spoke of rationality. Buddhism spoke of equality. Because it did not carry the burden of caste. Because it empowered them to rebuild their self-worth. Baba Sahib also studied other religions with deep seriousness. But even inside these religions, caste-like divisions, they survived in India. The social infection of caste, it traveled beyond religious boundaries. So Baba Sahib asked, if social equality is not guaranteed anyway, then where can they today be free? is answered within themselves, create new identity based on reason and dignity. But here lies a deeper analysis. Caste follows Dalits into mosques, churches, temples, and even into modern institutions. Caste exists in surnames, caste exists in marriages, caste exists in social networks, caste exists in employment. Sometimes, even in the smallest daily interactions, caste exists. This is the hard truth. Changing religion cannot erase caste completely, because caste is not only a belief, caste is a structure, it is a habit, it is a social memory. But conversion does something powerful. It breaks the psychological chains. It gives them inner freedom. It tells them they can choose who they want to be. It gives them a new lens to see themselves not as victims of fate, but as creators of their own identity. The sociological impact of conversion is equally important. It creates solidarity. It builds new communities. It challenges the moral authority of caste-based religion. It demands society to rethink what equality truly means. It disturbs old hierarchies and gives Dalits a new form of cultural and political strength. And politically, conversion becomes a declaration, a loud, clear announcement to the world. We visit humiliation. We choose dignity. When we look at the long history of Dalit struggle, one truth, it shines brighter than everything else. Social change cannot survive without political power. This is why Baba Sahib, he called politics the master. Politics are the master key. He saw something that many people ignored for centuries. He understood that without power, without rights, we remain only on paper. Without power, without dignity, it remains only a dream. Without power, the Dalits would continue to be controlled by those who benefited from the war system. So, Baba Sahib knew that political power is not about ruling others. It is about reclaiming one's own humanity. It is about standing at the center, not the margins. It is about having the strength to say, we belong to this nation as equals. After Baba Sahib, a new political wave began to rise. Slowly at first, then with urgency. A new generation of Dalit leaders, they realized that if they must protect themselves, if they must progress, they must enter the world of politics. They must not just vote, they must lead. They must lead. They must not just follow, they must shape the political landscape. And this is where one of the most powerful political experiments in India took birth. That is the Bahujana movement. Bahujan movement. So let's see the rise of Bahujan politics. The idea was simple. But this Bahujan idea was revolutionary. The majority of India, the Bahujans, they are made up of Dalits, Adivasis, OBCs, and minorities. If they unite, they cannot be ignored. This message created a massive shift. It lifted the political imagination of Dalits from fear to confidence, from silence to assertion. Kanshiram, he became the architect of this transformation. He showed them that political unity is not just emotional, it is strategic. He told them that their numbers are their strength. And strength must be organized. Out of this vision came a movement, and out of that movement came a new political force, the Bahujan Samaj Party. Then, when Mayawati rose to power, it was more than a political victory. It was a psychological revolution. For the first time, millions of Dalits saw someone who looked like them, spoke for them, and came from their lived reality, become the Chief Minister of India's largest state. It was a movement. It was a movement that transformed the inner world of many Dalits. It told them, if she can rise, we too can rise. Her era showed that Dalit leadership is possible. It showed that courage can enter the system and sit at the top. It showed that power is not the property of a few. It belongs to whoever has the will to claim it. But even this political journey had its limits. Identity politics offered pride, but not always progress. It created visibility, but sometimes struggled to deliver deep structural change. Leaders rose, but the movement did not always travel equally across all the castes. Internal divisions, competing ambitions, and the heavy influence of money and the heavy influence of caste networks, they restricted its full potential. And slowly, mainstream political parties, they discovered something. Dalits were a powerful vote bank. Instead of empowering them, many parties began treating them as numbers. They treated them as numbers, not as human beings. They offered symbols, they offered promises, they offered welfare schemes, but often avoiding deeper structural change. In many places, Dalit leaders, they were co-opted, absorbed into larger parties and used to attract votes, but never allowed to challenge the core power structure. This is the painful contradiction of politics. Power can liberate. Power can liberate. But it can also be used to control. And Dalits have to learn this lesson again and again. Let's see Dalits under neoliberalism. New hopes, new struggles. Because there came another turning point in the economic changes of 1991. The economic changes of 1991. Liberalization, privatization, globalization, the market opened, foreign companies came in, technology grew, new opportunities appeared. But the new opportunities are not for everyone. The rural economy weakened, agriculture declined, employment in villages shrank, and who was hit the harder? Dalits. They were pushed into contract labors, jobs without security, without benefits, without dignity. They entered the informal sector where exploitation is easy and accountability is low. They worked in factories, they worked in construction sites, they worked in delivery services, sanitation, but they are always working at the bottom of the chain. Neoliberal India, it told them the market will give you freedom, but the market gives freedom only to those who already have power. For Dalits, the market often created more insecurity, more uncertainty, more struggle. Yet, even in this environment, some new possibilities emerged. A few Dalits, they entered business. They entered into entrepreneurship. And they entered into industry. They built companies. They created networks. They formed organizations like DICCI, telling the world. They are telling the world, we are not just job seekers. We can be job creators. They rise it showed courage. Their ambition, it showed confidence. Their success, it inspired many. But Dalit capitalism, it also had contradictions. Only a tiny minority could participate. Most Dalits, they remained trapped in poverty and labor. Capitalism, it created winners and it created losers. And the majority stood on the losing side. Economic growth, it created skyscrapers in cities, but also it deepened the cracks in our society. As neoliberalism it expanded, NGOs stepped into Dalit spaces. Some brought support, some brought legal aid, some brought training, some brought visibility, but others, they converted Dalit struggles into projects. They converted Dalit struggles into reports. They diluted the radical spirit of the movement. Resistance slowly became professionalized. The fire of self-respect was replaced by the language of development. The struggle for structural change. The struggle for structural change, it became a checklist of small goals. This shift, it raised an important question. Is emancipation a project or is it a revolution? Dalits have always known the answer. Their journey has never been about paperwork. It has always been about dignity. As time moved forward, a new chapter began. A new chapter began in the long journey of Dalits. The chapter that is filled with fresh energy, new dreams, and new struggle. The world around them it changed, and naturally the shape of the fight also changed. They stepped into spaces that once felt impossible. They found new ways to speak, new ways to organize, and new ways to imagine their future. Their journey, it entered an age where their voices traveled farther and their courage carried greater weight. A new Dalit middle class, it began to be shaped by education, shaped by urban life, shaped by professional opportunity. They walked into universities, they walked into offices, and they walked into industries where their grandparents would never enter. They dressed differently, they spoke differently, and they dreamed differently. These Dalit people, their confidence grew, but so did the tension inside them. They balanced their personal success with the responsibility towards those still living in struggle. Their very presence in these new spaces, it challenged bold stereotypes. Dalits reminded society that Dalits are not passive victims. They are the authors of their own destiny. Across the ocean, another wave grew, the Dalits diaspora. They settled in countries far away and they built new lives, but they did not forget where they came from. They organized conferences, they wrote books, they created digital platforms, and they brought global attention to caste discrimination. Their courage, it carried the message of equality beyond India's borders. They proved that caste is not just a local issue, it is a global human rights issue. Inside India, Dalit youth became one of the greatest forces of change. Armed with mobile phones, social media, art, poetry, and music, these youngsters, they expressed their identity boldly. They used the digital world to expose discrimination, to expose shared stories, and they used it to mobilize that support. They broke the silence. They broke the silence that protected caste violence. Their creativity became activism. Their online platforms became their front lines. They stood up and said, "You cannot erase us. You cannot silence us. We are here and we will speak." Then Dalit women. Dalit women. They are often facing triple layers of discrimination. They emerged as strong leaders. They challenged patriarchy. They challenged caste hierarchy. And they challenged social neglect. They challenged all these at once. Their voices carried both pain and power. They organized movements, wrote stories of truth, and they demanded respect not only for themselves, but for every woman. Every woman facing caste discrimination. Their strength added a deeper moral force to the Dalit struggle. At the same time, Dalit movements began connecting caste issues with education, caste issues with land rights, caste issues with labor rights, with women's safety, environmental justice, and digital. They understood that caste does not live alone. It lives inside every aspect of life. This new intersectional approach made the movement sharper and more inclusive. With every new trend came contradiction. Some moved forward personal success, while others fought daily battles in nature. Some traveled globally, while others struggled locally. Some gained empowerment, and others faced even deeper vulnerability. Still, the movement grew, the movement learned, and the movement reinvented itself. But as the present evolved, the larger question remained. Where is Dalit emancipation heading? The struggle is not just about how far they have come, but how far society has it to go. For despite progress, the majority of Dalits still face the same structures that existed decades ago. Segregation, it survives in villages. Atrocities, they continue in cities. Unequal access to resources, it remains in everyday life. If society does not transform itself, how can their liberation be complete? If minds do not change, how can laws protect them fully? Dalit emancipation, it demands unity. Unity beyond jati, unity beyond subcaste, unity beyond regions. Dalit strength grows when they stand together. Their weakness appears when they turn against each other. A divided community cannot fight a united system. Their journey also demands class understanding. Caste today, it behaves like a class divide. With Dalits on one side and the rest of the castes are other side. True freedom, it requires challenging this entire structure, not only in its outer layers. They must also protest. They must also protest to protect themselves from co-option. Political parties, NGOs, institutions, they often approach them for votes, visibility, or fundraising. But emancipation cannot be rented or borrowed. It must belong to them. Their movement loses strength when others controls its direction. It remains powerful only when it grows from within. The path ahead. The path ahead. It requires new imagination. Bold strategies, they cannot solve new problems. Their liberation must be social, political, economic, cultural, digital, and deeply human. Education must lift Dalit's mind. Technology must open doors land and labor rights. They must secure livelihoods. Unity must become the greatest asset. Dignity must become the foundation of future. Emancipation is not just about escaping oppression. It is about embracing the fullness of life. It is about feeling joy without fear. It is about walking into any space, self-worth. It is about a freedom that exists not only in lungs, but in everyday breathing, speaking, dreaming, and living. The story of the Dalits, it shows that progress is never a straight line. It is a journey through storms, victories, setbacks, and breakthroughs. But every generation of Dalits, they have pushed the struggle forward. Every movement, it has added its own strength. Every voice has become a bridge to a better tomorrow. They have survived. They have survived centuries of exclusion. Yet, they have risen. They have risen with dignity. They continue to rise, not just for themselves, but for the soul of nation, still learning what equality truly means. So, when we rise, India becomes more human. When we stand tall, the country stands taller. Our journey is far from over. It moves forward with courage, with hope, and with unbroken belief that freedom, full and complete freedom, that freedom belongs to us. Our past, it is painful, but our present is powerful. Our future is bright. We rise. We rise. It is not just a chapter in the history. It is the promise of a